Hi, my name is Javier Grillo-Marxuach. I'm a writer and producer of television shows including Lost, Medium, and I'm also the creator of the television series The Middleman. The reason why I'm here hosting this roundtable is because it is a great honor for me personally to be with the reassembled cast of Max Headroom, a show that I loved and which I continue to love and which was a great influence on me personally. At our table we have Jeffrey Tambor, who played the role of Murray, Concetta Tomei, who played Blank Dominique, Amanda Pace, who was Theora Jones, and Chris Young, who was Bryce Lynch. And we're just going to launch right into this, if you guys don't mind. This is the first time in how long that you've all been in the same room?
Ever.
Ever?
23 years?
23 years since the show premiered.
Yeah.
I thought it was like 15, 10 in my head, and then 23, but based on we started doing The Age of Children, and it got very clear.
Right.
And I did not know who this was when he walked in.
And you still have the Bryce Lynch hair, which is stunning. It's really fantastic.
Yeah.
I still have the Murray hair.
But were you larger then, or?
No,
I'm just trying to get my head around,
darling.
where you've
Oh dear.
you've
Shrunk.
shrunk, but you shrank a long time ago.
Now you guys have not been in the same room for 23 years,
Yes.
and yet
Look
here
how well
you
we're
all seem to be getting along very well. It's a good thing.
I saw Jeffrey driving down like Moore Park, maybe like 5 years after we had done the show, and we both pulled up alongside of each other, and I leaned over and I'm like, Jeffrey, hey, and he looked at me and he smiled, and I said, I don't know what to say, and you said, don't say anything, and then you just
no.
and then you drove,
didn't know you
and you just
were.
drove off.
I'm
And
you.
you know,
I'm
and
you.
that literally set me up for like the next 15 years of just
Therapy.
Never stopping.
hating
Yes.
Hollywood and television.
Oh, but you are one of the
But you
funniest
said it in a really
men
sweet way.
I've ever
I mean,
met.
you
Jeffrey.
truly, you genuinely meant it. I mean, I think that it was like
Jeffrey is known for that.
I'm shocked.
Fast.
You just strictly had a moment. It was.
I
just
don't
like-
know where my car is parked right now. I understand. Did you have this?
no, I didn't.
But we bumped into each other at one of those those thingy bobs, right?
Science fiction
farmers-
conventions
a
or
farmers
conventions
market.
or.
Oh, farmers market.
Farmers market.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you
All right.
autograph things and get vegetables, I think.
Right.
So have you come to hate Hollywood?
No, not particularly. I mean, there was a moment in time where I kind of grew bitter and jaded towards.
Well, we were saying that. I mean,
kind of
what
stuff,
a lot of light came on this show. I mean, we were on the cover, as I believe, of Newsweek.
Yes, he was ubiquitous, and there was a large article in Newsweek about
There
Max
wasn't.
Headroom.
The cast.
I remember
though,
seeing
was there?
that and going, and
10 years, right?
I
On a
was
series,
at
10 years.
a thing with South by Southwest, and I was doing this workshop, and all of a sudden I happened to mention Max Headroom, and there were 20-year-olds for the most part, 20 and 30-year-olds, and they erupted into applause and hooting, and it's known. I mean, it's still known.
Absolutely.
Huge cult following, though.
Yeah.
Huge.
No one was doing anything like that then. It
Right.
was really.
No.
I was saying to Steve Roberts earlier that I had to read that script 3 and 4 times to get it.
Yes, that's
Not my part, but
every-
3-4
Right.
times more
But
than
tremendously
I had to read it.
complicated technologically,
Yes.
sort of
yes.
futuristic
You
material.
You couldn't
yeah.
just get a beer,
And it
walk off and come back.
it required a lot in the filming, but also required a lot of the viewer. I mean, you
Yes.
had to be
That's right.
savvy.
Yes,
Also,
yes.
you would walk onto a set where there were guys at computers for the first time that I'd ever seen.
It was so mind-boggling, the dialogue, to me. I mean, reading this dialogue, it was so brilliantly executed, brilliantly written. I didn't understand a damn thing I was saying. And much less what you were saying, or Murray, or, and then you'd see Amanda scenes and you just say, how the hell could she have memorized all that dialogue, which made no sense. So I figured, geez, if I was a serious member, how the hell, am I going to make this believable? I don't understand a thing that's going on. Then, as it all unfolded, it all became quite clear. But that was the joy of it. That was the challenge for the actor and for the intellect, if there was any left, after having read any of those scripts. Because Jeffrey's right. I had to go through those numerous times when they were delivered, and I read it, and I thought, and I read it again, and I thought. And then something looked familiar, and then something would land. But I mean, I could never do it without reading it less than 5 times.
Right. Well, it's a very dense show.
Very
Obviously,
dense,
yeah.
beautifully dense, really.
And, you know, now in thinking about it, I mean, really, what these guys were doing, they were reinventing what the world looked like
Absolutely.
on a weekly basis.
Yes.
For instance, if you picked up and you were drinking a drink, it was blue and had foam coming out of it, and you were drinking. I mean, everything was being reinvented.
The cost, I'm sure,
Yeah.
killed it. I
Yeah.
mean, now
Well, I
you
think
you
there's
have to
another
work
reason.
on that.
When you look at a show, Arrested Development was a little like this, had this problem, that if you watched it, you couldn't pick up where you were.
Yeah.
Right.
And nothing spells death.
And not being able to
yeah.
relate,
If you
you
don't
mean
know
have
what's
any,
hap-
yeah.
I mean, I remember friends of mine watching, they were older, but they were watching Arrested, calling me saying, I don't understand what's going on. I went, oh, no. Because that's the death now.
That's right. You just couldn't get up and get a beer
And
and come back
also,
and pick up where you left off.
These
You
guys
really
were not
couldn't.
afraid of ambiguity.
Right.
And they were
That's
poetic.
right.
I mean, I was just talking to Stephen.
Which we love. We love
Yeah.
that about them, but it doesn't necessarily work for
You
Middle
don't always know
America.
exactly
I mean,
what that
that's, you know,
moment is until
Right.
it's revealed.
Right.
And I don't know about the tolerance for that sort of
Well, that's a big part of how television. I mean, it's one of the places where you guys were really at the forefront. Is that now you've got shows that are very heavily serialized, things like Lost and Heroes and all of that. And your show really, you needed to know that world to step into it. What was it like stepping into that world for the first time? I mean, this was your first gig, right?
For sure, yeah. I dreamt about being on television up to that point, and it was fairly anticlimactic.
Really?
To a certain degree, because I mean, you kind of walked onto this kind of playground of equipment and
Smoke.
lights and and people and
And you were so young.
yeah, and
Sweet.
it's like, let's rehearse it, and it was a television pace, so it's really quick, and next thing they know, they're like, all right, go back to school.
How did you get this role? I mean, did you audition?
I had just auditioned for something for ABC out of New York, and I'd flown out to LA for a screen test, and it was to play like an Italian kid on a sitcom or something, and
Because you scream Italian.
yeah, exactly. So I went back to Pennsylvania, and they called a couple weeks later and said, come read for this show. And one of the reasons I think I ended up doing that part was I was the generation that had a PC in your bedroom, like one of the very first computers. and
Right,
was
right.
very fluent in computer speak, and I built a little Wozniak, black box, and was like phone freaking and dialing long distance for free into like bulletin boards and downloading, pirated games back in 1982,
Right.
probably.
Through your acoustic modem, of course.
And a huge fan of Matthew Broderick's, war games and, those kinds of.
Right. Oh, you were the real deal.
Yeah, and so
actually. We
they
walked in,
they sent
yeah.
this big, the audition
Yes, he
piece
knew
was a
exactly what he
giant
was
speech.
doing.
I think it was like the
Monologue.
explanation of like how blipverts work or whatever.
Yes.
And it just, I just picked it up. The words and the kind of the speak just came naturally.
My audition was fantastic in England, I've got to say, with meeting Rocky, Annabelle, and Matt, the four of us, meeting in a room, chatting, talking about it, being kind of feeding off each other, being inspired, and then maybe just reading. Matt and I did one scene. But it was more about, I love that, what happened to those auditions where you actually got to meet the directors and really kind of work with them and then get the job in the room.
You got the job in the room.
I did.
Oh, wow.
Were you a big deal?
No, I was doing theatre. I just left drama school. I was doing a play at Tricycle in Kilburn, and I was just, venturing out. But anyway, it was fun. It was a fun experience.
And you got it in the room.
Got in the
It's
room.
fantastic. Now, but for the two of you coming into this, what was your experience, Jeffrey and Concetta, sort of auditioning for this show? And I mean, did you know what you were getting into when you? Was it just another pilot audition? Or was it?
It was
Yeah,
very
it was
cut and dry.
That's true.
I met Peter and Steve, and I was sort of. Did my progenitor have a bald head? Was Murray bald?
You should watch the film because it's literally. I mean, it's very strange.
yeah,
You're
I've
watching
never
this
seen
man
the
playing
film.
the character
Never
that then you went on to
never
play for
seen the
14 more
film.
hours, and he does look a little bit like you. I mean,
think
He
Yeah,
does.
I think
I mean,
that's
I
what I
can't
think they
really
get a bald
remember.
guy.
You had a mustache, didn't you?
I did.
Yes, you did.
And I remember Peter always would say, faster, faster. They'd be coming down.
Yes,
and
yes, and he wasn't even directing.
Faster. Just faster.
oh, really? You were constantly being needled to be faster
Yes.
and more intense,
Like
and
the day, I definitely felt that urgency.
But I think what you were saying sort of bespeaks that we had that at the beginning, and then it sort of became ours. And
It did become
ran
ours.
with
We
it.
owned it.
were you, sort of caught up in this tension of making this expensive, this big, this complicated a show? Was it a fairly relaxed set for you then? What was it like during those long periods between
Both.
Yeah.
It had tension, and we moved very fast. Again,
Yeah.
faster.
And we loved working with each other.
And
I think Matt might have been more frustrated than anybody in
Yeah.
terms of
for
feeling
sure.
the pressure of the
That's right.
tension.
how so?
Just because of the amount of work that he had taken on and was, I mean, it was...
And he was Max Headroom, for
responsible
God's
for.
sake.
Yeah,
Presumably,
Max
when you
Headroom.
rapped, you had
It
to
was
go
his
and put on 5
responsibility,
pounds of
yes.
makeup.
No, not every day.
And he was really physical on that show too.
Very
He was,
physical.
he was running and jumping, and I mean, it was not like he was just standing around.
So let's talk about Matt for a second, in lieu of his appearance. I guess my big question for you guys is he more Edison Carter or Max Headroom? When you get on the set with him, when you start
He's
working
more
with
Matt
him.
Frewer. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt was really a part of the creation of Max Headroom. I mean, a lot of his humour, personality, genius is in that character. So it's, I think, as you said,
It's hard
Matt
to
is...
separate that. No, yeah, because he created it from.
If you watched him on the set, you would say he. It's hard to say this, but it was a very, very serious actor, but knew enough to keep it very light, and never took himself so seriously that he would take himself out of the work. So that spirit always was through it. He was.
But definitely set the tone because it was an intense.
Yeah.
It was an intense set. I think
Yeah.
too. I mean,
Oh,
there was
that fog.
always the kind of humor, and you're right. It was probably Matt.
Yeah.
Doing that. A lot of Charlie Rocket doing that.
Right.
And you but there was a level of like, let's get it and let's get it right. And of course, the pace of the show lent itself to being intense too.
Well, what's interesting though is that Max Headroom is an innately comedic character. He was on David Letterman making fun of David Letterman. He was in the Coke ads, and in his talk show, he was such a card. And then you guys were playing very intense stuff that almost didn't have the tone of how that character originated. When you worked with Max, was he on tape, or was Matt reading his lines off screen with you? Was there any sort of, because that's really where most of the comedy came in. Was there any improvisation with Matt or with Max, or was it?
Well, no, wasn't he filmed and then he was on the
Screen, yeah.
screen?
There was a combination. I think they always tried to have stuff there, practically, so that we could react and play back to it. But a lot of times, we'd come back for coverage later for over-the-shoulder stuff, and we'd be reacting just to little tape marks and stuff. But I mean, Matt certainly was. He was getting
more than one episode. They would do bank 4 or 5
Yeah.
episodes.
That's
and
right.
he would,
Yeah.
That's right.
I saw
Yeah.
one. It was absolutely amazing what
Yeah.
he had to do. He came from shooting over to that
Right.
one day and worked his tail off,
Right. Sure.
one after the other, and that's not like. First of all, the makeup is,
It was a heavy
Huge.
prosthetic.
and then a number of just sound bites that he had to do over and over and over and over. So it was a whole other film,
Right.
and that was the matrix of what we did. So it was no light affair.
And he was wearing, he had like a fiberglass half suit that he had to
Yeah.
wear the
Yeah.
entire time. So, yeah. What was your perception of the show, both when you were first told of it, when you auditioned for it, and then later on as you were doing the show? Obviously the content was extremely
Well, it was
forward-looking.
breakthrough. I think we thought it was breakthrough television. I felt like we were on this new kind of exciting
Wave, yeah.
bubble happening. But I think that there was a lot of confusion as well about what was going on and who was running it and why it ended, who created it, who all
Yeah,
those
it filled
people.
with mystery and
It
no
is.
answers, really, no
Right.
answers. All my friends were wondering what I was doing. I mean, they didn't understand. I mean, really, all my friends were like, they weren't on the Waltons. That was, but I mean, comparison to what Max
Yes,
Headroom
yes,
was
yes,
doing,
right.
everyone was on the Waltons in
Right.
comparison to what we were doing. I mean, that's the biggest.
Your competition was Miami
Digression.
Vice, I believe, and Dallas.
That's right.
Which are very much shows of their time in very different ways. So, this was certainly something very different.
Absolutely, and it wasn't, this nighttime soap opera drama. This was heady. This was smart. This was smart writing, smart television, smart producing. It was perfectly cast. Perfectly cast.
The great Barbara Miller.
Yeah.
Casting.
She was
God
one
bless
of the
that
great
woman.
casting directors ever.
Ever. Because she
Yeah.
was the real deal. She had a wonderful heart
Yeah.
for a casting director. I mean, for a producer or director or anybody. But I mean, she was the real deal. She loved actors. And whenever you came into the room for these auditions, You know, she'd always put you at ease. She was the
And she'd acknowledge the connection. It wasn't from one
No,
job
no,
to the
no.
next.
We were also
no.
on
Yeah,
a studio
no,
that
she
was
was a
is
lovely
no
woman.
longer
Lovely.
Lorimar.
No,
right?
it's Warner Brothers now. Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
it's Warner Brothers.
But you know,
now.
but that's an
Lorimar
interesting
then.
thing about the way the show was cast, because even though some of you came from the original English production and all that, there is a real sense, and for a show like this that is so sort of science fictional and so heady and all of that, there really was a sense of a connection between you as characters.
Weren't there two other sort of Godot-like characters?
Yes,
There was Jerry Burns as the body bang.
That's
Those
right,
guys
Jerry
were
Burns.
great.
Yes.
And the heavy
And then a
set
heavy
fella.
set guy. Who
Rick
was the-
Dukeman.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were
They
great.
were
were
fantastic.
Yeah.
But what were their names, though, and the characters?
And what was their function? What,
They gathered dead bodies and took them to the body
That's
banks.
right, right. And
those
boy,
guys
they
were
looked
great.
like they did it
And they were
every
a
day.
team
Yeah.
off camera too. They
Yeah.
hung out all the time.
All the time.
You know.
The show was against consumerism. It was against television. It was deeply satirical. As you were doing the show, did you ever get the scripts and think, what are we doing? They're going to
We
run us out of
loved
town on a
it.
rail, you know?
Do you think actors love
No,
all that
I love
stuff?
it.
Yeah,
Love
no,
it.
no.
Yeah.
It was just it was another game. It was another game. Every script was another game. And the stakes were always high. The stakes were always high. That's why, as an actor reading a script, even though it took me a while to understand what they were saying, it was another game, and it was so much fun because you were on this playground.
You're provoking,
And-
though. The provocation that every episode, put out was like, oh, yes, get people talking, thinking.
Absolutely.
You know,
I felt comforted by
the Englishism around you.
the Brits around me that
made it
had
more
had
authentic.
this pre-experience before, and I felt quite comforted by that because there was that was like sticking a lightning rod in the ground, because then it continued in this country, and so I felt very, very comforted by that, and those dynamics that we had within the American and the British cast members.
When we shot the original Channel 4 film for television, I mean, we all felt that we were doing something kind of fun, creative, but not that different or obscure. We just felt like we were all doing what we all did, which was shooting kind of radical commercials. I mean, being, creative and going out on a limb a little bit. So I guess the transition for us, we didn't know what to expect when we came over with the show.
And I always felt that we were the second generation, and there was some secret behind a rock of how to do this, because there was a lot of stuff coming,
Right,
and there was
And the whole
then
design of the show, the
Morgan.
look of the show.
Absolutely. And so you had to. It was almost like stepping on this bus that was going quite fast.
But in fact, we'd only shot the pilot, really,
Yes.
and
We
we
reshot.
remade the
That's
pilot,
right.
so there was no real.
Yes.
I mean, all we'd done in England is that
That's
kind
right.
of Channel 4 1-hour sort
Yes.
of movie for television.
When you go to films, you see the background,
Yes.
the background artists, as they're called. Every single background artist had to be
Yes.
outfitted and made up.
Immersed.
And I
into
remember that
Absolutely.
this
Yeah.
was an atmosphere that you never
It's like
saw the
Woodstock.
sun,
You're
and it was
absolutely
grunge. And I,
right.
I'm sure that
The
lunch call was
makeup,
probably
hair,
really,
clothing,
unique.
Oh, yes.
all
so it wasn't la-di-da time. It was
No, it
like
was
always on the
all
move,
punk.
always
The
trying to.
machine was really
Yeah.
grinding.
And it was
And it
never
never-
clean. It was always dirty and always grungy. You had
Yeah.
a crew that they weren't working on Dallas. They were working on these little models and special effects and all the production design and prop work. I mean, it was the people that actually made this show were so dedicated to making that world. It's so unique and
The
hour-long
moonshine
television that didn't
astounding.
exist at that point.
Yeah, it exists on. I mean, you can see it on the screen. It's a
Even
tremendously
Paul
detailed world,
Goldsmith, I think, was the DP, was lighting it with fluorescent tubing and things that
Yes.
these weren't.
Remember all that tubing being tweaked?
Yeah.
With tape.
Didn't we
Like,
shoot in
Jeez, it's
a
astounding.
place called Fontana?
Yeah,
You've got
that
things
was
to say
the
about
that was the
Fontana?
location requirement. Was to find a place that no one that was kind of run. Now let me pick up.
Well, obviously, production designed to look like a
We
dystopian
went to Skid
future.
Row a
Yes.
lot.
And in 1987, you're really at the height of downtown Los Angeles urban squalor. So
Yes, yes. It was
What was the-
tricky.
yeah.
It was tricky going down there with us the whole
What's
time.
Morgan Shepherd as Blank Reg in that Mohawk. When we were under the bridge in Long Beach or something, I mean, and there were all homeless with their dogs, and you couldn't tell the difference between Blank Reg and all those people under the elevation at Long
Morgan
Beach.
will be happy to hear that.
I mean, really, it was all his leather and his thing, and then, of course, if he popped his eye out, then we were all...
Oh, come on. That's right.
Sorry, I mean, he's not here.
We kind of were feeling out what is the show about? What show are
Right.
we making? The
Right.
production process was like that too. You would
Yes.
sit down in a room and they would stick a video camera in your face on a fisheye lens this far away
Oh, that's
and stick
right.
something in your ear.
That was a very hard thing
and
to
there would
shoot.
be 3 stages
Right.
away
Yeah.
on the Lorimar lot would be where the real filming was going on, and you would be
Right.
interacting with
That's
something
right.
and not have any clue as to
So
what.
so was that happening in real time then? All of the stuff
Real
in the video
time.
monitors?
Real time.
But sometimes stages away too. Like it wasn't like it was just like
Sometimes
around
they
the
crank
car.
it, but
Compliment.
sometimes it was real time.
Well, and
Yeah.
interestingly, that's part of the British influence because that's very much how Ridley Scott shot Blade Runner.
And Brazil had a
And Brazil had a lot of
Yes,
smoke.
yes,
Yes.
I remember
Right.
specifically, we had this giant video playback village built on the stage, where these guys that were figuring out how to sync up all these pre-existing video clips to all the hundreds of computer screens at once, were in there, shuttling back and forth and doing stuff, like
They were figuring it out as we were filming. I
because
mean, it
they were
was-
inventing like wireless stuff and like these technologies that we just take for granted now. But they were inventing that. They didn't
Yes.
they didn't exist.
But it's part of what makes the show so interesting to look at now is that yes, the technology is retro, but it was retro for the '80s even. I mean, the CRTs are in big boxes, and they have those
Yes.
exposed typewriter keyboards like in Brazil and all that, and it makes the show very tactile. It's a strange show because nobody you can't have smoking on the network now. But you had that big Ayn Rand cigarette holder that you were.
Yes,
this
you
was one of the
I
did.
had
last-
my cigarette
No,
holder.
you always had a cigarette. You
Your
smoked.
character
You smoked
did.
on screen as well.
And I
You
did.
yes. Yes, the only one who
We
didn't
all
smoke
did.
was
We-
you.
I mean, I smoked my entire career on television. The more I think about
But
it.
you don't. But do you smoke in reality, or were you
Providence,
smoking
Dead
the?
Mother, smoking? No, I didn't smoke. in
So were you
reality.
smoking the herbal cigarettes, or?
Well, no, I was smoking the real one.
No, this is
That was a real deal.
What do actors do now with smoking?
They have herbal
Cloves.
cigarettes
Yeah,
or
but
cloves. Yeah,
they're
yeah.
horrible.
more-
Ugh,
I think they're
Jasmine
worse
Rose.
for you.
Yeah.
They're awful.
Oh well, you can't inhale them.
And they smell like cannabis, so it's like
That's
you really
horrible.
defeat
It's
the
like-
whole purpose.
yeah.
No, actually, it smells like pot.
Well, exactly. Yes, cannabis. So. I didn't want to say pot. I don't know.
I wonder why you had trouble with the script.
This is a
I'm so
family
sorry.
panel.
You know
I
what?
didn't want to
I'm
get into the
having a
drug
hearing
use.
issue. I must have a hearing issue. I actually didn't say that. Would you edit this, please?
Well, you know what? I will segue into the question for Amanda then, because since I have you
Oh
on
yes,
right now.
you have me on the hot
Let's talk
seat.
a little bit about.
Let's just
about,
fry me up.
No.
Roll you up and smoke you.
Blank Dominique had a very specific look, shall we say?
Yes.
There's a wonderful scene where you and Charles Rocket, as Ned Grossberger, are in Cicada, I believe, downtown, and you were wearing a very, shall we say, cleavagey outfit.
Yes. Well, they basically poured me into everything that they wanted me to wear, and it took 2 hours to do my hair. My hair was down to here, and Jan, God love Jan. The
You had a
Emmy
real
Award-winning
B-52
Jan.
going in that entire time. I mean, your hair
My
was
hair was
huge.
like
From
this,
Zoltan.
and it was all my hair, and it took her 2 hours to do it. But what did you do? It's
No,
my
you were always
turn
in the
now,
same
Jeffrey.
suit and the same vest, Jeffrey. You were always dressed.
I
you were
love
very,
Jeffrey. Jeffrey was just that solid, same look, same outfit kind of.
I mean, you were playing a
security.
character out of
Mentioned Zoltan.
Oh God!
Who is Zoltan?
Zoltan was
was the makeup,
Makeup.
key makeup guy. I
the
think
brilliant. He won an Oscar for Rocky.
He was as instrumental in our look as
He was Hungarian.
And I think he was married. He was married, right? And I think maybe he and his wife were they the makeup team or something?
They were the makeup team.
I think they
Yes.
might have been.
That's right.
Yeah.
They were the makeup team.
You did a lot of bathtub work on the show.
That's right.
That's true. I forgot all
Well,
that.
and that was the
It's a
other
bit
great
spongy
thing about my
toilet
set was I
rats.
had all these little toys, and literally I could just pick up anything and play with it, and
Right.
and we could do the scene. Like
Yes.
they filled it up with stuff business
Props.
for me to do.
And they always try to give you something specific. Like I remember there's some scenes where you're in the tub, and then there's one where you're doing the hula hoop. And the whole opening of the scene is revealing that you're doing the hula hoop, and everybody comments on it, and all that. So I mean, it was almost like they gave you this playroom to sort of,
And it was like that too. I mean, I literally would just pick something up and we could just play
Go
out the
with
scene.
it.
Yeah.
I remember you read all the time. You were a reader and still are, of course. But I meant that was you always had your head in the book as well.
Oh, English people, I think, well, I mean,
Well, that's
Yeah.
tend to read
They know how to read.
growing up. I'm not going to say that I've, but so maybe I was fresh off the boat, as it were, so I probably did read much more then than I do now. I used to read in your trailer.
okay. That'll be enough. And we're going home now.
Well, you got around.
There we
Tambor,
go.
didn't you?
Jeffrey, I had a
Here
crush
I
on
thought
Jeff.
I was the first.
He says he had
You had a
a
crush on
me,
Murray?
but I did have a crush on him.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Did you?
I did.
Why didn't you say something?
Well, because she knew what would
Well, I
happen,
mean,
had
you know.
she?
It was just something that.
These are spectacular revelations that are
It's
coming
too
out.
bad
I
Morgan
can't even
Shepherd
speak.
isn't here to.
We're both speechless. Let's move on.
Yes, let
But she did always have her head in a book, and we did have long talks, and she was much sought after.
There was a couple episodes where every couple weeks a new leading man type guy on television would show up.
Oh.
and,
There was just an endless parade of Dirk Squarejaws coming
it was
into
kind of
court.
like- and there was
Miss
a,
Pace?
there was a talk on like who's Amanda dating this week.
Do you remember the transport guy, Randy?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, of course.
He taught me how to surf.
I remember
Crap
that.
on us and
I
ran
spent
He
a
was
lot
like
of
a
time-
movie star
He
himself.
was like a movie
Yeah,
star.
like
he
a-
was
yeah,
cool.
yeah. He drove like a
looked
Corvette and he
cowboy.
surfed.
remember
Oh
and-
my
Yeah.
God!
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. And Matt bought a Corvette, remember?
I went to Carl's Jr. with you and Matt, and they stuffed me in the back of the Corvette. In fact, the first
They
car.
Carl Jr. right on that corner.
Yeah, the first car that I drove was Matt's Corvette. He had bought this Corvette, and Randy let me drive it on the set, and Matt saw me driving his Corvette on.
Oh
on the
my
line.
God! That is.
I didn't have a license. And you had a little convertible.
Oh,
that-
Carmen Gear.
Little Carmen Gear. that
Oh
you-
my God, really?
I remember
myself
your
a
Carmen
little
Ghia.
Oh my God, we were
The
so
sexiest
happy
car
about
ever
that.
made.
Oh,
It's a fantastic
I
vehicle.
was in my element though. I thought
That was your thing, yeah.
I've got a show. I've got a Carmen Gear. I'm surrounded by fun people.
If you
I
were
mean,
to
I
if you were
can't
to
get
ask me as a fan of the show what car Theora Jones would have driven, it would have been a convertible Carmen Ghia.
There
I mean,
you
it's very
go.
much of the style
Yeah.
and style and period as well. It's interesting because the things that I remember from the show are scenes that tend to be very emotional. Actually, I remember there's one scene where you're there was a reporter who had been murdered. Who you were in his funeral with Edison, and it was interesting because both of you were tearing up during the scene and all of that.
I
sort of
remember
stuff.
that.
And-
I actually do
remember
remember
that.
that. I do remember
We
that.
And you
worked-
did, Matt.
we worked on that
I do
one,
remember
baby.
that. It was early in the morning, so I was overtired, so it was easy to
easy to
cheer
weep.
up. But I remember that because it was so different for both of us. Were we terribly well reviewed?
It was one of those shows that was a critical darling. It's considered brilliant but canceled, and a show that was also very much ahead of its time. And I think everybody
That's right.
acknowledged that.
So ahead of its time. I mean, had this been here now, we would have run
That's true.
10 years.
That's true.
I mean, there would have been no doubt there would have been no
There would have
cancellation.
been more than water in this cup.
Yes, and limos pulling us up.
It was at a point where television drama, especially, was transitioning into something that clearly it is today. What it's
Yeah,
become.
yeah,
And I heard that we were,
It would
you
have
would
been
know more
just
than anybody at this
embraced
table. We were
today.
hugely expensive, were we not?
Yes, you were.
Yes, we were.
You had a helicopter. I don't know what the pattern was on the show, but it was a very spendy show. I mean, you can see it on the screen.
There was a lot of backstage which we didn't know about, and then it started to. You could see it. People started to get worried, and you could start to see.
Yeah.
I was always watching Brian Frankish, who was our line producer, and he was tearing his hair out.
As expensive as the show was, I can imagine your line producer was probably a
He
total
was.
stress case.
Is
you
he
know?
He
still
was.
alive?
He was. It was stressful.
There was probably no other
was-
line producer in Hollywood that could have done that show. He had that quality about him that
That's right.
you could take that guy to the edge, and he
Yes.
was going to operate out there and pull it together.
How did you find out that the show was canceled, and what was your
Jeffrey remembers better than I.
Yes, please.
Mid-sentence.
Mid sentence.
We were downtown.
Uh-huh.
I believe earlier that day we did the scene on the roof. Something like a helicopter or something.
Yeah, no, you were on the roof of the.
Then we
Close
moved down to
contact.
the offices. There was trouble. We already knew. I mean, there was something going wrong, but we couldn't quite. And we were all downtown, and Matt and I were doing a scene. And Brian Frankish came on, and poor Brian, that he had to do this. He yelled, "Walk away from your instruments now.
my God.
Drop your instruments and walk away now."
They didn't.
And it was
Amanda, were you
over.
there on the set?
No, but I got the phone call. It was halfway through the day. I mean, it wasn't even like
Yeah.
they didn't. It
was midday.
Anything complete. It was just a.
And
Boom,
I remember
over.
we all went to a bar very close. The grips, the crew, Steve came down. Everybody came down. And I think we got all pissed.
Sad.
It was
everyone.
sad. We
I
all
would have
cried. I
had
cried.
that.
I know
That
Matt
was
Very
cried.
yeah.
sad. Yeah.
It was very sad, but I mean, I'd never seen it like that, which bespeaks that there was probably, I mean, for that to go like that,
Dropped. Yeah.
somebody said not
Somebody
another
was angry.
cent.
Yeah.
Right.
Not another cent. walked
Pull the
away.
plug now.
Yeah.
You know.
It was like that.
And it was, I'll never forget it because I went, wow, that is
Felt mean.
show business.
What I remember the most about the show were the people that were making the show. It took me a long time to realize that it was a job, or that you were making these connections with these people, and that it was going to be for the duration of the thing that you were doing. They were always family to me. So, I'd identify these people as part of my family, because it's so tight, and you're doing something together in a way that most people that come together don't share those kinds of experiences. So it took me a long time to realize that the connections that you make and lose over time were, there's a sense of loss when you move on.
You have tremendously intense short-term connections
Yeah.
with a small group of people.
And when you're not an adult and have your outside relationships fully formed, you don't know how to kind of deal with that. So again, kind of, I don't know that I said it that beautifully, but the idea for me was I was just connected to the guy that was in the truck making the special effects, and the guys that were in the video village, and
Right.
these were my friends and family, and so when I said that I had seen Jeffrey, on Moore Park, and I said, wow, I don't even know what to say. It was that moment of like seeing a family member that you hadn't seen for a while,
Right.
And when he was saying to me, wasn't a cruel thing like.
I can take it that way, yeah.
Don't say anything. It was just an
recognize you.
he was giving me that message of acknowledging that look, we spent a really significant.
What's interesting about it is, this comment is that he's saying this, well, this is obviously how you feel when you're young and in the business. Actually, it's how you feel every time out. And it's the actor's dilemma. And we really do, you do fall in love. And that's part of the job. And even if it's a cruddy job, you just sort of...
And I think that was the thing that really hurt me being an actor, was, or how I kind of ended up isolating myself when I would go out and make a movie on location or do something. I didn't want to, and I didn't realize this until
You know,
years
the heartbreak
later.
of
So
parting with.
I didn't want to connect with anybody.
Interestingly enough, I've
what
had
is
the
your-
opposite story, I guess, to tell about, the show. I felt like I was arriving from England in Hollywood. I was on this fantastic journey. I was very positive and excited, and this job was the best thing that had ever happened to me. So I was in my little car going to the studio lot every morning thinking, thank you, yes!
Yeah,
So I just had like an incredibly joyous, time. And I loved going to the studio lot. There was something special about actually going onto a lot, parking your car, having your trailer, and going to work every day. There was something like...
It's sort of like that cartoon where, you go into the lot and there's always people walking around carrying giant props.
Yes, that was me. I was looking at all that. What was yours?
Well, this was the very first television series that I landed. After coming from Broadway and off Broadway and Chicago theater, New York theater. And so I didn't have a clue. So I was so excited. I mean, I, as a kid, would watch television with my mom and dad. I'm an only child, and from Wisconsin. And so there'd be Warner Brothers, there would be MGM, the Magical Studio, there would be Universal, Fox, and all of a sudden, their daughter was at one of these studios, and they could watch me in Wisconsin after we had gone on the same television set, a few years later, many years later, a brand new TV set, and see Holly, because that's my middle name. And it was like so exciting to pull into Warner Brothers, as Amanda said. It was such a unique experience. Such a unique experience. And the very first time, you never forget. It's not that any time after is old. You're just more grateful to be working. Whenever you get to be a woman of whatever age, you're just grateful to be a working actor, still in the business, still loving what you do. And but that very first time, and then to work with this great cast of actors, great writers. It only made you a better actor, and they raised the bar for whatever I had known or learned, and I learned a lot from all of them.
Outstanding. Well, Jeffrey, you were the head of this team, so
Yes, he was.
who better to close out our discussion?
You know, the actor's job basically on his W-2 form is to fall in love.
Right.
And we loved it. There are very few times when you do something, you send it, that it's received. Usually, sometimes when you do it, it's edited in such a way that you go, well, that's not what we did.
Right.
Or this and that. But that was, and it was quite, in fact, it was even more rich. And it was very filmic and very beautiful and very cutting edge. And I like that. I always thought that's something I wanted to hitch my ride to. It was nice to go to work, get a good sum of money, and also to be in love with the core people, and then also the product.
Yeah, the product is
Lived
so
up
fine.
to
It's
its,
good.
you know, yeah.
I have to say thank you to all of you for being here and for sharing your memories of
great.
Max Headroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Those of us who
walking us down this wonderful lane.
Those of us who love the show, who are influenced by the show, and I'm sure everybody who watches this will be very grateful for your being here. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. God bless.